Hello and welcome to another episode of Fintech Focus TV with me, Toby. Today, I am absolutely delighted to be joined all the way from Cyprus by Quinn Perrott of TRAction Fintech. Quinn, how are you?
Good. Hi. How's it going, Toby?
Very good indeed. Thanks. Very good indeed. Listen, it's been great hearing a little bit about the business so far, and our off screen just chatting through the story a little bit and how the last couple of years, volatile years, have been for you. We're going to get into all of that and much, much more very shortly. But before we do that, can you give us a little bit of background about yourself and the business, please?
Okay. Well, as you said, my name's Quinn Perrott. I'm one of the founders and the co-CEO of TRAction Fintech. I originally came from the IT industry. I got very lucky to sort of accidentally stumble into derivatives trading and end up working in the IT department at a Forex and CFD firm back in 2006 and fell in love with it more so than the IT aspect. That sort of segued into me being one of the founding partners for an online trading, Forex trading company in Australia called AxiTrader that got very successful. We picked the time right, and compliance was something that I'd sort of never really heard of before. It was always something that someone else did in an office over there. And I ended up becoming quite good friends with our external compliance consultant. I took a break from the industry for a while and got a phone call one day telling me that there's this new regulation that all derivatives have to be reported every day through the governments, ASIC, FCA and ESMA and so on. And would I like to be involved? And really fell in love with the project. My business partner, Sophie, is a compliance lawyer. I had the IT background and finance. It fit really well together. And here we are today, 6 years later, helping hundreds of investment firms around the world with their trade reporting requirements.
It's an ever-growing sort of leap of information that's needed, isn't it? And I think I'm really fascinated by this because I think there's more and more founded companies in this space who've got former lawyers who've seen opportunities and sort of moved into that alongside. And I love that blend of the lawyer and the IT specialist who sort of come together within a sort of common interest in the space that I think is has been a real growth area internationally and globally over the course of the last couple of years. So within the space that you're in, there is obviously a sort of captive market because it's needed by law, but there's obviously choice. So when people are coming into this and speaking to you, why do they use TRAction Fintech?
Yeah, it's a great question. So as you alluded to, regulatory reporting isn't a fancy product that you can bolt on. It's a regulation. You have to comply with it. It's often very hard to comply with. The way the regulation's written is essentially you can report to your regulator, usually through a trade repository, or you can delegate that to a third party. So for instance, in Europe, companies have the choice to report to DTCC or Univista are the main players. And they have a trade repository is essentially a big database. And it's one big database to fit all kinds of products. So, you have derivatives used to hedge currency exposure, you have complicated options, you have structured investment schemes. Essentially, all this information is going into the same field. So you can sign up with a trade repository, do your in-house development, build this system, submit your stuff off, read the regulation, have your lawyers on staff, or you can come to a third party like TRAction, and we'll do three things for you, essentially. The first one is we'll help you understand the regulation. And a lot of that doesn't come from us reading the law any better or being any more brilliant, but we work for hundreds of clients. So where things are vague, or confusing, we actually learn as much individually from each client as we teach them, right? But we have those 100 clients, we draw on all that knowledge and experience, and we share that with every new client we advise or onboard. Once we've helped them understand the regulation, we actually do the process for them every day. So instead of them having to get their data in that regulated, strict government database format that's the same for all the products, we get the data as they have it within their back office system or trade reporting system or order management system, right? So we take their raw data. We have several full-time programmers on staff that essentially write the software code to translate that data, enrich it, and build it up into a regulatory report. And then we submit that off to the trade repository. And our clients don't even need to directly open that account with a Univista or a DTCC or Trax. They operate under TRAction's master agreement. So we have a wholesale agreement with the main trade repositories, and then we bill our clients, we do all the support. TRAction being such a huge client to the trade repository and reporting often tens of millions of transactions a day, we get very, very good discount rates. And so we're able to include all our services essentially free for our clients when they pay like the normal rack rate of trade reporting. So it's really, it's a win-win for us and the client. And actually it makes things a lot easier for the trade repository because they can focus on having a good trade repository, getting the data right, feeding the information to the regulator, and they don't have to go over the same difficult connection and formatting issues with each client. We take on that. And as ourselves, we're not a regulated entity. We don't need to be. So it gives us a bit more flexibility. We work directly for the client. The trade repository is sort of working almost more for the government or the regulator. So we're really there to help the client get things done, get them on time, get them in the T+2 format.
So it's really interesting, this, isn't it? It's when you went, sorry to cut over, but I think there's regular viewers of this show know that I'm obsessive about trying to unlock the reason why companies are doing well and have done well over the course of the last year or so. And it usually comes down to sort of a sort of golden thread of about 6 or 7 things that are done and executed really well. That's the sort of I guess predominantly are you solving a problem that needs to be solved, which in fintech there are plenty that don't. There's plenty of clever things that solve problems that no one really needs to have solved in the first place. But is this something there where there is a genuine issue? The second thing I think I'm really fascinated by is just this digital world that we live in at the moment. People's expectations of customer service have increased so much, and I think the financial sector has traditionally been massively underserved in that. And the businesses that are able to sort of remove that friction and provide something with strong customer service that makes things easier for people to do their job in complex areas, such as those you're speaking to, the reporting aspects that you're speaking to, can suddenly create great opportunity for people to do the day job better. And from what you've just said there, that seems to very much fall into that category of just being a smart product that makes sense. You mentioned win-win, which I think is a really important theme of every good company I've spoken to over the course of the last year or so, of making sure that this is something here where people can win from engaging with and using with you. So when you were thinking about that, and when you mentioned Sophie, your business partner, beforehand, when you were looking at this and saying, right, okay, here's our opportunity to build, grow, and disrupt and engage something. This was what, 2015, wasn't it? Back out in Australia. It's spread over the last 6 years or so to 4 locations across the globe. This is a journey that's obviously ticked the right boxes. I've seen the sort of numbers of clients that you've signed up and the various institutions that you've been done. So it's working.
Yeah.
Talk to me about some of the reasons why you think that's happened and why you've been successful.
So I think we bring a very good combination of the 3 difficult points about it. We often call this the triangle of pain. Is there's a way the regulator envisions the financial markets, right? And the way they'll write the regulation, they have a view, they'll define field names and what they mean. And that's based on the knowledge of the FCA or ESMA or other regulators. And then there'll be how things sit in the firm. In the brokerage firm, they'll know what they mean by like the value of a contract. They'll know what they mean about, the price, the duration, the expiry date, what's a derivative, what's not. And then at the other end, there's companies like Univista and DTCC and CME Store in the US will build a database based on their knowledge, but it doesn't all line up. So it really is trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. And because of core founders of the company and our broader involvement, we've had a lot of involvement with the regulators. We read over the regulation, we deal with it a lot. We understand the trade repository really well, and we also understand the clients really well. And the regulators really, they probably should be, but they're stuck in their own world. They're like, this is the way it is written in this regulation. It's published on the FCA website, right? And then the trade repositories go, here's our database, here's our validation rules. You have to get these fields in this format and here to be accepted. And then the broker's like, well, this is the data we store about a trade, that, this is what we've got. This is the life cycle of a trade. This is how it happens. And these things all need to come together. And TRAction as a third party can understand these 3 points of the triangle pain as we call it, and help ease that pain and bring them all together and really translate that, see it from the regulator's perspective, see it from the trade repository's perspective, and see it from the client's perspective. And I think that has been one of the secrets to our success. Also, that we're quite unique in being a full service business. So, there are great trade repositories out there. There are great regulatory and trade reporting consultants, and there are actually some great platforms that you can get off the shelf, but none of them will do the trade reporting. Effectively, all a client really needs to do is sign the contract, give us the information that we need, and pay for the services, and we'll get them up and trade report. And sometimes the smaller, dumber clients are actually the easiest ones to get compliant. It's the big ones that are they know enough and they've got enough to be dangerous but not quite do it, and you're sort of fighting them. But we really are a turnkey approach. From we'll look at your products, we'll tell you what we think's reportable, we'll look at all your different data sets, we'll tell you what we think we need, we'll get that data and we'll enrich it, we'll deal with any errors. We don't just throw errors back at our clients. We actually find out, we know what caused that error, this is what we need to fix it. Okay. So we are really quite unique in that other people have a piece of the puzzle. And I find, especially with uncertainties around huge growth in trading volumes, the pandemic, people potentially getting sick or not coming into work, anything that can be outsourced and automated is a great advantage. Because in reality, a lot of people who aren't using TRAction, they've got a really skilled staff member or group of staff that are using a spreadsheet and a lot of manual processes, right? And when someone's sick, those processes fall apart. When a new person comes into the firm and they haven't learned all these undocumented systems, if their volumes suddenly double or triple overnight, which has been happening, they don't cope with it. But when they outsource it, another company takes care of it, you've got a data feed, it's automated, people love that more than they have in the past. They really rely on that.
I think that's a really interesting point you raised there, isn't it? About the sort of drive to automation that we've seen over the last year or so, and that sort of backup more than anything. And it goes across industry. I mean, look, we've invested more in automation than at any other stage in our business, and I think that goes across every company out there to say, look, how can we become more productive, more efficient, full stop. And that's a common theme, which has been, I guess, a byproduct of the pandemic. And I want to focus on the pandemic a little bit, because you mentioned it just then as well. We've seen massively increased trade volumes. We've seen online derivative trading increase spectacularly over the course of last year. So, whilst I think if we rewind just over a year ago, we're probably seeing a lot of confusion and panic and uncertainty on people's faces. In particular in financial services, a lot of opportunity started to emerge. And as we saw a different thing, people had to adapt very quickly and provide new solutions and deal with clients who had a whole world of new problems and issues, some of which you've just alluded to being presented to themselves. So this show has spent a year talking about turning the negative into a positive and speaking to people, a plethora of people, really fascinating people over the course of the last year who've really gone on to the offense rather than defense and created opportunity where others may have been more defensive around that. I'm assuming that you were very much more in that opportunity camp, and I'm really interested to hear how yourself and the team have dealt with the pandemic.
Yeah, so it's been such an interesting time. It has not only just increased the volatility in trading on the markets, but we've seen some really bizarre stuff. And it's almost like the bizarre has come to normal, because I start thinking about these things and I'm like, wow, that is so bizarre. And then it's just gone away. Like GameStop, for instance.
Yeah.
It was a stock that people drove up for no real, well, to try and squeeze out Wall Street. It was more for fun. It was, let's all band together and put our money in and see if we can drive the stock up. Something that was almost unheard of before, which is a result, I guess, of a lot of people having some extra time on their hands, having a slightly different mindset and working at home. Huge trading volumes, new records on Bitcoin. I think Tesla's up, was up 10 times from what it was a year ago. So this has been very good for our clients. Probably a few of them have had some outages and struggled to deal with the increased load, but they haven't been too bad, because derivatives are often quite volatile anyway. It's more the traditional stockbrokers, I think, that have had a traditionally not very volatile business that has struggled with it. That's all been good for us. Obviously, our clients prospering is great for us, and increase our trade volume, keeps our clients happy. On the other side, with the pandemic, we have staff in 4 different countries. Most of those have had we've had offices there that we've had to close, and people work from home, people come back.
And those offices are Australia, Singapore, Cyprus, and the UK, right?
Yeah. And so it's been quite a struggle. Probably the hardest thing has been the people side. So we haven't actually had any terrible outcomes, but just like people, the markets have been volatile. People have been volatile too. So I've often had to remind myself that there's been quite a stressful time for me as well, and think with the staff, are they at their best? Are they having a bad day? Has this been stressful for them? Different people deal with uncertainty differently. My business partner and I have had to almost take on more of an HR role, think more like a counselor. How do we support these people as well as keep them focused, as well as look after our business and make sure they do their job? And that's been an interesting challenge, is how everyone's sort of cope with it differently at different times. And you'll sort of see some people working from home was great for them and they were humming along. And then you can really tell when it sort of affected them and sort of chipping away at their psychology, and they're missing the human contact. So that was a really interesting change. The flip side of that is with clients. So both my business partner and I used to travel a lot, especially with me in Cyprus. Part of the reason I'm based here is it is pretty close to London. Time zone's close. You can jump on a plane. I would normally go every second week, and then all the new client opportunities, I'd sort of say, hey, I'm going to be back in London next week. I always line up a visit. And I haven't been there since January last year, and the first few Zoom calls were a little bit awkward, but now I actually find that I'll schedule a video Zoom call where in the past it would have just been a phone call, and I'll find that it's actually much more productive, because you can tell if people are bored. So one of the things essentially with a sales call is you're kind of giving a presentation. It's almost the same one that you give on stage. It's the same one you give in a boardroom. You're giving it over the phone. There might be 4 or 5 people on the phone. When you're on in a seminar or an expo, you can really tell if the audience is interacting, bits you want to skip over, bits they love, just by the body language. In fact, you can feel it. It just comes naturally. Whether people are bored, you wrap it up, you move to the next one, you go to the selling point. You can't do that on a phone call because everyone's silent. You're talking. On a Zoom call, you can really look at someone and go, okay, I'm losing them. Move back in, refocus it. Is it relevant to them? Wind it up. So that's been a huge positive, actually. And the travel time, of course.
Yeah.
Your
air miles are suffering, though.
Yeah. I think they sort of extended and gave lots of things like, we won't expire them at the end of this year. But I've given up on on those.
I'm collecting too many. Okay, good. So there's an interesting piece there you talk, and there's more and more talk about wellness and looking after your people and all those sort of things. You're right, it's been challenging, and it's a universal thing for every leader. You mentioned it quite interestingly there, which not a lot of people I've spoken to have done, which is it's been a stressful and challenging time for you as well. So I think sometimes as a leader you can put everyone else first and sort of almost forget yourself, within that process too. Tell me a little bit about what you as a leadership team, as a company, have done to make sure that your team are faring well. I mean, you mentioned there about the talking and the being aware of it and the counselling aspect that you've done from it. But how have you really managed that? Because it has been so different. And I imagine when the interesting thing about your business, and why I sort of clarified those areas, is I think you've got 4 areas that have had vastly different experiences at vastly different stages in the whole process, right? Australia, to my knowledge, has been relatively unblemished for a good 6-7 months or so. Singapore, very, very aggressive at the start, and have gone through various cycles of very strict ways of working around it. We know that Cyprus has sort of yo-yoed a little bit, and the UK has been very much the same. With a team that's dispersed, with a business where you are seeing different elements of the story at different times, trying to keep that connectivity is a very interesting challenge. I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, so you really hit the nail on the head there with different stages. So yeah, Australia's been relatively untouched. We did have a bit of an outbreak in Melbourne, where sort of for a while Melbourne was almost the epicenter of at least the English-speaking world. And like last summer, things had sort of returned to normal, and you had your eat out to help out, and everything sort of looked quite normal in Europe. And Melbourne actually was quite a bad outbreak and a long lockdown, and little outbreaks in Sydney. So it's been that swinging thing, and we've often had to remind ourselves and the other staff is things might be humming along in Australia, and the UK staff seem a bit distracted or whatever, or vice versa. And you just have to remind them, hey, they're going through something that's different and a different cycle to us. It was like this for us a while ago. The other thing that we've done is been really disciplined about the regular meetings and about turning your camera on. So people would just naturally fall out of cancel the meeting if they didn't need, or they'd just keep they'd only turn their camera on if it was for a client meeting. And we really had to drill them in that we want to maintain that aspect of professionality. We want to all see each other, even if you're locked in the house or actually quarantined because you've been in close contact and you literally can't see anyone. We want to see each other's faces, smile at each other and have that routine. And that really took discipline at a management level of reminding people, turn your video on, like the meeting is every single day, regardless of whether we think we have anything to talk about. And that really helped, having that routine.
Yeah.
Because the nature of the business that we've got, it's probably more suitable in some ways to a work from home hours than a work hour. So work hours, they come in 8 hours at the office, maybe have to check in a bit at home, but because most of our clients are 24 hours, it's sort of more flexible to, the UK staff will have an early morning start, touch base with people in Australia, maybe then they take their kids to school, have breakfast with their family, then come back on, and then they might have a bit more of a break in the day, and then get some last trade reports in the evening because there's a midnight deadline. So that can very easily delve into people keeping weird hours and getting out of sync with routine. So it really took discipline, keep enforcing the routine. Routine and just being understanding of people and reminding ourselves, maybe I feel stressed, maybe they feel stressed, cut them a break, think about that. Some people are watching news a lot more than others. Some people are tuned out. Really giving everyone a little bit of extra slack and understanding.
it's reading the room, isn't it? I think that's been important throughout the whole period, and I think that sort of level of you mentioned there about sort of regular daily communication and connectivity, which I think has been important as well, hasn't it? Those companies that have really over communicated the situation has given that sort of sense of confidence and trust into the teams that I think has been very helpful for businesses in a really challenging time. I want to move on to that because we've all had a sort of storm over the last few years, and change has been the constant all the way through that. We were talking beforehand about MiFID II, and then Brexit uncertainty, and then the pandemic, and that then creates a sort of sense of lurching for. There's an old history essay that I remember writing, which talks about a foreign policy lurching from one nervous expedient to the next, which very much feels like what we've had to navigate as business leaders over the course of the last few years. So without knowing what's on the horizon next and what comes up, it looks like there is a strong economic outlook globally, and whilst there's obviously a lot of QE and governments have lent a lot of money, and there's the likelihood that will have a correction at some sort of stage in the future. What we're looking at is opportunity, and like what you were talking about beforehand with regards to this, about doing what you plan to do. So tell me what that means and what that looks like, and how you now, having sailed through the waves, you're on a bit of clear ocean. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, so as you alluded, really since the year before MiFID II, so MiFID II was January 3rd, 2018, it came live. So a year before, we were sort of putting out content on it, doing seminars, doing breakfast events, really learning the ropes, getting everything set up. And then since then, things haven't stopped. It's been, as I said, bouncing from that to MiFID and Brexit. So the most exciting thing in the future is actually the stability, just being able to do those things like tweaking our internal training, improving all the processes, getting more efficient, and all those small incremental changes of just doing the same thing, but doing it better and better and better is actually, it sounds boring, but it's quite inspiring. Because as you well put it, lurching from one sort of crisis to another, especially with Brexit, which was so many deadlines that then were passed, and it's still not entirely sorted out. So just being able to manage the company well, plan for things, structure, grow it evenly, have some strategy and some goals and fulfill them. Target areas of the business and areas of the industry that we want to move into, and knowing that there's not going to be some huge crisis, hoping that there's not going to be some huge crisis that we suddenly have to turn our attention to. There have been some great things for the business that come randomly with increased volatility in trading, but it's really when you identify a goal and slowly work towards it diligently and you succeed is really satisfying. So I'm looking forward to a bit more of that, some nice, even, planned, structured growth.
It sounds exciting, doesn't it? Dare we dream? I think that's for me. That's one of the what I loved about that is its simplicity, and going back to those sort of common traits of businesses that I think have thrived is those incremental changes and those things of just trying to look to improve piece by piece. We one of our core values is Kaizen, Japanese manufacturing principle of continuous improvement. And I love the idea of actually now just being able to work, on the business and rather than firefight, actually sort of really see where it can create. And I anticipate nothing other than spectacular innovation from you guys and seeing that business move further forward again. Quinn, one of the things I always like to do is give people the opportunity to say how people should get in touch. Who should be talking to you right now? Who can you be helping? Who should be reaching out to you? And what's the best way of them doing that?
Anyone who has a trade reporting requirement for MiFID, MiFIR, EMIR, or SFTR, and the best way to do it is just Google TRAction Fintech, and you'll find us on the website. You can talk to us on live chat, ring us up, email us.
It's got a good chat bot on there. I was on it earlier myself, so I can vouch for that. Quinn, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us today, and lovely to hear about the business. And yeah, I love the story of where you've been and where you've come from and how you've navigated some difficult times. And looking forward to, as I say, seeing that sort of continuous improvement come over the next couple of years as well. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
Good stuff. And thank you all for watching. We will see you soon on another episode of Fintech Focus TV. Thanks a lot.